Dawn broke over the Sahel like a held breath. The light came slowly, pale and dusty, revealing a line of soldiers standing at attention on a cracked airstrip outside the capital. The heat had not yet arrived, but it was coming. It always did. Somewhere in that silence, a camera drone hovered, its soft hum almost lost in the wind. The footage would later be analyzed in Washington, paused frame by frame, replayed with subtitles and speculation. But at that moment, it was just a quiet inspection. One leader walking the line, one small decision that would ripple far beyond this dry ground. The man at the center of it all moved without ceremony. No motorcade, no polished boots, just a plain uniform, dust already clinging to the hem of his trousers. Ibrahim Traoré stopped in front of a young soldier whose feet were bare, cracked by heat and stone. The soldier tried to straighten, embarrassed, eyes fixed forward. For a second, the world narrowed to that moment. Then Traoré bent down and removed his own boots. He placed them gently in front of the soldier. No speech, no cameras invited closer. Just a quiet exchange that would later ignite arguments in think tanks and living rooms across the United States. By noon, clips were everywhere. Social media feeds in Chicago and Atlanta. Cable news Chiron text scrolling in New York, a former Pentagon analyst leaned back in a studio chair and said, "This is not just symbolism, this is messaging." Viewers were asked to like, subscribe, and comment as the video cut between the boots, the soldier's stunned face, and satellite images of the region. "Where are you watching from?" the anchor asked. "Are you seeing what we're seeing?" Behind the image was a pressure few could see. Traoré had not come to the airstrip by chance. For weeks he had felt something off inside his own command. Supplies vanished. Fuel numbers did not match patrol logs. An internal report disappeared before reaching his desk. The bare feet were not just poverty. They were evidence. Someone close was skimming, diverting, selling to the very networks his forces were fighting. And that someone had access, trusted access. In a secure building not far away, an aide watched the footage loop on a muted screen. He had served Traoré since the early days, shared late nights and whispered plans. His smile did not reach his eyes. He knew what the boots meant. He also knew the leader would not act openly. Not yet. Traoré believed in patience, in watching the watcher, in letting the trap close slowly. Washington noticed the restraint. An internal memo circulated at the State Department, marked urgent but quiet. Analysts noted the pattern. Populist symbolism paired with silent purges. A senior official told colleagues that this was how regimes consolidated legitimacy while rooting out internal threats. Another warned against underestimating the intelligence sophistication at play. "This isn't theater," she said. "This is counter-corruption as counterinsurgency." At night, Traoré followed his instincts. No sirens, no official vehicles, just a convoy with lights off, moving toward a warehouse near the river. He watched from a distance as trucks arrived. Their manifests clean, their contents not. Arms crates marked as food aid. Fuel siphoned into private tanks. And there, giving orders in low tones, was the aid. The betrayal landed heavy but did not break him. He recorded, he waited. The next morning, U.S. News framed it as a mystery. Why had an aid vanished from public view? Why were flights grounded without announcement? A retired CIA officer went on air and said this felt like a quiet crackdown. "When leaders do symbolic acts like giving boots," he said, "they're signaling alignment with the rank and file while isolating elites." Social media split. Some Americans saw hope. Others saw danger. Traoré moved with precision. Arrests came at dawn across 3 cities. Bank accounts frozen. Communications cut. Interrogations were firm, clean, documented. Confessions followed, not from fear but from evidence. The aide spoke at last, voice hollow, admitting the network reached into procurement, offices and foreign intermediaries. Names were written down. No one was spared by rank. In a small room, the Barefoot Soldier tried on the boots again. They fit poorly, but he stood taller. Traoré watched from the doorway. Later, that soldier would become a symbol on American screens. Labeled the boy with the boots. A child of the ranks. Americans said, proof that leadership could still look like sacrifice. Others cautioned against romanticizing power. The debate grew louder. Trials followed, public and restrained. Sentences were handed down. Reforms announced. Supply chains rebuilt under oversight that even U.S. auditors grudgingly called robust. A policy brief in Washington concluded that the crackdown had stabilized the force. Another warned it could inspire similar moves elsewhere. Markets flickered. Diplomats recalibrated. And yet questions remained. Was the gesture the beginning of something lasting, or the mask of something harder? Traoré returned to the airstrip weeks later. The soldier wore new boots issued properly. Traoré wore the same old ones. The camera drone hovered again, catching the dust, the light, the silence. Americans watched, argued, felt something stir. As the broadcast ended, the anchor leaned in. "What did we just witness?" he asked. "A leader who gave away his boots, or a message we haven't fully decoded?" The screen faded before the answer came. The story stayed open, unresolved, waiting for the next frame. The question lingered long after the broadcast ended. In Washington, the screens went dark, but the discussion did not. In offices where maps of Africa were pinned with colored markers, analysts replayed the footage again. Not the moment with the boots, but the seconds before and after. The way Traoré paused, the way his eyes scanned the line of soldiers, the way the convoy left without ceremony. To trained observers, those details mattered more than the headline. Inside Burkina Faso, the atmosphere shifted. Soldiers spoke more openly. Logistics officers double-checked inventories without being told. The fear that had once lived quietly in corridors was replaced by something sharper: accountability. Traoré did not announce reforms with long speeches. He issued short directives, transparent audits, rotations of command, independent inspectors drawn from units that had never worked together before. It disrupted old loyalties. That was the point. The AIDS trial became a test case. Proceedings were broadcast, but selectively. Faces of judges clear, evidence shown methodically. No shouting, no spectacle. When the aide finally spoke, his words surprised many. He did not blame ideology or foreign pressure. He blamed opportunity. A system that assumed trust instead of verifying it. That admission traveled fast. In U.S. media, commentators argued whether this was genuine justice or controlled theater. A national security expert on a late-night panel said, "Even if it's staged, it's effective, and effectiveness changes the balance." In a village near the border, families gathered around a radio. They heard that stolen supplies were being returned, that patrols would resume with proper equipment. Among them was a child who had lost a brother to a roadside attack months earlier. The boy listened silently. When the first convoy arrived days later, he watched soldiers step down in boots that matched. For him, it meant fewer funerals. That truth did not need analysis. The United States adjusted quietly. Aid packages were reviewed, language softened. Engagements resumed with new conditions focused on transparency rather than control. A memo circulated noting that Traoré's popularity spike was real and measurable. Ignoring this, it warned, risks ceding narrative ground. Traoré remained cautious. He knew symbols fade if institutions fail. He invested in training, in records, in boring systems that never make headlines. The boots were never mentioned again in official statements. That too was intentional. Months later, another clip surfaced. Short, grainy. Traoré walking alone at dusk, boots worn thin, dust rising with each step. No gesture, no exchange, just movement forward. In the comments, Americans argued once more. Leadership or performance, strength or signal? The answer, like the region itself, refused to settle. And that uncertainty, quiet, unresolved and heavy, was where the story truly ended. If you're still watching, tell us where you're watching from and what you think this moment really meant. Like the video if it made you reflect. Subscribe for more stories that live in the gray space between power and principle. The silence that followed did not mean the story was over. It meant it had moved underground, into policy rooms, into villages, into the quiet calculations of people who no longer waited to be told what leadership looked like. In Burkina Faso, the army began to change in ways cameras could not capture. Reports moved faster. Complaints were filed without fear. Young officers learned that loyalty to the nation mattered more than loyalty to any individual. It was slow, uneven, but it was real. In Washington, the file labeled with Traoré's name remained open. Analysts updated it monthly. Some wrote that the boots were a calculated myth. Others wrote that myths only work when they touch something true. A retired general summarized it in one line during a closed briefing. "You can fake an image, you cannot fake discipline for long." That line stayed. For the Barefoot Soldier, now reassigned to a training unit, the moment became private history. He never spoke to journalists. He wore regulation boots every day. When asked by recruits what it felt like to stand in front of the president, he said only this: he was listening before he acted. That answer spread further than any speech. The child in the village grew older. The road near his home became safer, not perfect, not quiet, but safer. And in places like that, small changes are not small at all. History will decide what this moment truly was. A turning point, a performance, or simply a reminder that power reveals itself most clearly in what it gives up. The boots will wear out, the footage will fade, but the question will remain. What kind of leaders do we believe in when the cameras are gone? If this story made you think, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. Like this video if you believe leadership is measured by actions, not luxury. And subscribe for more stories that explore the thin line between authority, sacrifice, and truth.